An important part of that is that if you're using municipal bonds or tax-exempt municipal bond funding, that tax credit would be reduced by the amount of the interest advantage of tax-exempt bond financing. That'll come into play later on when I talk about the economic analysis we've done. All right, the project update. As Andrew said, we've been working hard for quite a while on this. So the modules are purchased. The actual modules themselves have been quite hard to get because of supply chain issues. And so we have secured the modules and have those stored. We've also been doing the engineering. We need to do the engineering in order to get the utility interconnection application, as well as all the other approvals within the city and the building and electrical permits. We're almost done with that. So the pool, city pool, has a parking lot shading structure at both sides of the entrance. No changes there. The rec center is going to be roof mounted. We're coordinating with a re-roof project that's long overdue, and so that'll be nice. As soon as the roofing is done, we'll start our work. And then the ground mounts, there used to be two distinct ground mounts, one between the river and the library and one behind the Holiday Inn. Because of flooding issues, potential flooding issues, we've combined, everything is all now behind the Holiday Inn. We also bumped into an issue at the wastewater treatment plant. The utility told us that the transformer that's there, that they own, was not sized big enough for this and was actually pretty old. And so SOPEC has stepped up to use some of their carbon fee money to support this project by paying for the city's portion of getting that transformer upgraded. So there's, again, the familiar project layouts for the three sites. And then what we did is, in light of the new regulations with the IRA allowing the city to take the tax credit, we have to say, what would happen if the city bought the system with cash or finance a system? So we ran 4 different scenarios: a cash purchase, the straight 25-year power purchase agreement where a third party owns the system and simply sells energy to the city. The city buys a system not with cash but with debt financing through the bond, or with what we're calling a hybrid PPA bond purchase. And as we looked at it, the best economics are with a hybrid PPA. So in that model, we would set up a PPA, we would build, own, and operate the system, and then at year 6, the city would have the option, not the requirement, to purchase a system. After year 1 through 5, all of the tax credits and all of the depreciation advantages that we would get as a private entity would be used up, and we'd be able to sell it to the city for a much lower price, and the city would also be able to tap into that municipal bond financing. So that gives the optimum economics. The system is slightly larger because the modules that we're able to get these days are a little bit more energy dense. And so pretty amazing environmental impact that this project will have, including 1,834 metric tons of CO2 per year. These are numbers that are hard to even read, they're so big, but more than 2 million pounds of coal burned per year of electricity would be offset by this. 1.2 million pounds of waste, the equivalent of 1.2 million pounds of waste being recycled instead of landfilled, and the equivalent of 4.5 million miles driven by an average passenger vehicle per year. These are all from the EPA's greenhouse gas equivalencies calculator. So next steps. I owe the city and Lisa an updated power purchase agreement from Oak Tree Capital. She's already been through this review of a legal document from the previous financing party. And then the improved PPA terms of this new agreement, instead of the PPA terms going up at 2% per year. We've reduced that to go up at 1.75% a year. And that's reflecting the increased economics of the tax credit being 30% instead of 26%. And then construction's on schedule to hopefully begin this winter at the field, and then in Q1 at the pool. We don't want to have any construction going on by the time the summer hits for the pool. And then the community center, we're kind of waiting at the project schedule for the re-roof. So we're coordinating closely with BDT Architects, who's working with the city on that project, and intend to follow right after the roofing contractor as we install solar on that roof. And there's a picture of the Kokosing headquarters building in Westerville. And we've changed our mission from, it used to be accelerating the shift to clean energy, and we're focused on that. And now we combined our mission with Kokosing's mission, which is creating jobs. It's all about employment. It's all about putting people to work. And so we combine the two, and our new mission is putting people to work to build a clean energy future. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions, if there are any, or any comments.
So, thank you very much for the presentation. First of all, are there questions from members of the committee? Yes.
Yes, thank you for the very helpful presentation. With the PPA hybrid model, it sounds kind of like rent to own, but could you explain the option to purchase it 6 years in? Thanks.
Yeah. So with the previous PPA that we were planning on working with, as well as multiple other power purchase agreements, the one that the city already is in, the one that we've done at Federal Hawk Schools here, basically it's a kind of a public-private partnership. And so an entity with a tax appetite buys the system, pays to have it installed, takes the tax credit, and then takes depreciation, which is another tax advantage, to shield income from other parts of the business and get basically a time value of money advantage for when you pay the taxes on it. And then builds a system and then owns and operates it. It's responsible for insuring it, operating it, maintaining it. If it breaks, we are not paid unless the system is producing power, so we would maintain it, etc. And then that can go on through 25 years through the project PPA lifetime. The PPA document itself gives the city the ability to purchase the system in a year. If it's purchased within years 1 through 5, the price is very high because we would have to pay back the tax credit to the federal government and recast the financials to recapture the accelerated depreciation. After that has all happened, though, in year 6, the project price is a lot less to buy. And so the city would have the option to buy the project in any of those years after that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the, yes, Member Crowell.
Well, thank you, Mr. Greenfield, for being here. Appreciate the information. I should know more about this, and I'm going to ask some basic questions. Are we paying you or the private entity a per kilowatt hour price for the electricity?
Yes, that's the basis of a power purchase agreement. It's 10 cents per kilowatt hour, going up each year at 1.75%.
Oh, that's the escalator increase.
Yep.
Okay. So is the calculation there? What is the price we're paying in year 6?
Yes. So it's a little tricky. The tax rules don't allow us to name a sale price. And so there's what they call a terminal value floor price that effectively sets the price. And it's, I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's going to be in the actual document as an appendix for each year what the terminal value is.
Okay. But we're starting that at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions from members of the committee?
I'll ask one more. I'm curious if you've seen cities find helpful ways to even visualize the kind of carbon neutral impact this is having, rather through a dashboard or through some sort of regular reporting that shows how this is helping?
Great question, Micah. The system is going to come with a data acquisition system, which is kind of boring and functional in the background and tells us what the inverters are doing and if they're all performing up to spec. But then it also has a feature showing how much power this week, this month, this year, year to date, or a lifetime, system lifetime, the system has produced. And we also are able to show that the equivalent greenhouse gas reduction goals. So that's something that the city might be able to put on their website, as well as be able to reference and check and say, in the last 2 years, it's done this much, in the last 10 years, it's done this much.
Thank you. And we initially get that information just in the form of a report or through some website?
It's going to be a live website that you all will be able to log into, or the city could put on, a link to it on their one of their pages.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else from the committee? Other members of council? Yes, Member Swank.
Several questions today. It seems like, 2 or 3 years ago, we first started talking about this when folks came to City Rec and were sharing all of this. So the first question has to do with that. The way this is drawn in slide number 7, I believe, the tennis courts are placed right up against the back of the Holiday Inn. And if you remember our conversation back then, we thought that that would be a concern. People banging tennis balls right up against the back of a hotel. Is there any possible provision of moving those away from the back of that hotel?
For us, we're kind of following the lead of BDT Architects, who's been working with the city on the tennis court and paddle, all the ball courts in general.
Right.
So we're not making a decision one way or another. They did consult us and asked what options we've got and where would be the most economic ways to use the existing parking and to deal with the shading, et cetera, and the existing roads. And so this is the design that was developed. The other piece I'll point out is that in the red, there's a little driveway that we're putting in to maintain access to the community gardens as well.
Okay, second question. With the current bond market, have you factored that into the agreement? I mean, bonds are just crazy right now. Had we done this 6 months ago, it'd be a little more favorable financial position than it is today.
Yeah, the interest rate that we used for the analysis was 3.5, which is approximately what the most recent bond was. It's certainly up now. We expect that it's going to be going back down in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, but we have no idea what 6 years would be. So we used the same number in our assumptions.
Okay. What effect will this have on our SOPEC contract, which is up next year?
Well, no effect. SOPEC's very in favor of this. In fact, has one of the most favorable kind of pro-solar net metering provisions in the private CREST marketplace. So we've been working closely with them. The city, I'm not sure how many facilities, but the 3 facilities that we're powering are all part of the 3P rate, which I guess public power production rate or something like that. But it's basically a very advantaged rate. It's one of the lowest prices of anybody selling power. And by switching to solar, they would still all be eligible to get power at that rate. So they'll still be able to negotiate and or SOPEC will be able to negotiate on their behalf and maintain the same rate.
Yeah, I think right now it's about 5.3 cents per kilowatt hour.
It's lower than that.
I mean, that's what it reflects on my electric bill.
Yeah. So SOPEC members, the general public, myself included, get a low energy component of their electric bill. And then these facilities, because they're such large energy users, it's even lower. It's 4.5 and change. That rate is locked in until June of 2023, at which point they will be going up to a new rate. And so we used the expected jump in our analysis.
And last question.
Just 1 minute, Member Swank. I think the mayor would like to say something on this topic before we move on.
Yeah, just to supplement a lot of what Mr. Greenfield was saying, is that your rate is also different than the city's rate based upon you having the 100% renewables. So, you know, for residential, that gets the 100% renewable energy, which is coming from Winrex out of Texas, you know, the price is slightly higher for the residential. But with our mercantile accounts, our government accounts, we're not on the 100% renewable, we're on the standard rate. And again, to your point, I think that SOPEC has done a great job, you know, being able to get in and get the rates they have for the city of Athens. And ours are remarkably low if you look at, make the apples to apples comparisons.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the last question. At the end of 6 years, when you first shared this with us 2 or 3 years ago, I picked up the phone and called a mutual friend of ours, Tom McCalman, and I asked him about this, and he said the best thing to do would be to ask you when we get to this point. So the question is, what, in similar situations like this, what do most entities do? Do they purchase it? In other words, would the city buy it? Do they let it continue? Well, what seems to be the most common method of, you know, wrapping this whole thing up?
Yeah. Funny you mentioned Tom McCalmont. We're actually almost done building a project at Muskingum University that he was involved with. It's optionality is what most of our clients want. So far we have had one client, Kent State University, opt to exercise their purchase rights under a PPA. So we had the PPA going with them, and I think it was in year 7, no, it was probably in year 9, that they decided that they kind of, each year they did an economic analysis, looked at their cost to borrow money, and kind of predicted the future about inflation, and said, you know what, now that the tax credits are burned off on this project and we can buy it at a big discount, we're going to go ahead and buy it. And so that's Kent State University is one that bought it. Several others have not exercised that. They decided, you know what, we're going to continue to buy the energy and let you all own and operate this and use our capital for other things. So I think it's a case-by-case basis, and I expect some of you might be on city council 6 years from now, and we'll evaluate what the situation is at the time and make that decision. And the way the PPA is written, we will continue to operate it until you all decide that you want to buy it. And if you don't want to buy it, if the city's coffers are empty and bonds are through the roof, you can just continue to own and operate it, or continue to buy the energy from the PPA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from members of council? Yeah, Member Crow.
So I'm trying to look at the picture here and understand, and maybe the city administration can respond to this. Is the dog park gone? Is the dog park on that picture?
It would be, there's 2 new dog parks that have been built down at West State Street, East State Street. West State Street always has them. And those are what are going to replace the former baseball diamond that was turned into a dog park.
Okay, so this will all be a solar installation?
It will.
Okay.
Except for the community gardens, which is still there, and some parking and the ball courts.
Okay, so is that what am I seeing up in the top left for me? Are those the tennis courts, or is that the Holiday Inn?
North is to the left on that image.
There's a Holiday Inn.
Oh,
It had to be flipped
I see.
in order to fit on the screen.
I got you.
Sorry to create the confusion
That's all right.
there. Yeah.
Okay.
Just
Now
figure it
I was trying to figure out what the road.
Give you a little
Makes more sense to me. Thank you.
taco neck.
Got it.
Are there any questions or comments from administration? Yes, Mr.
I do
Mayor.
have a comment. You know, we're extremely fortunate in that in 2018, the ballot initiative for the carbon fee was passed by 76%. We have a real opportunity with the ability after 6 years to have, you know, to completely purchase the system. You know, I believe that with that money that is for municipal solar on municipal buildings or green space, that a wonderful use of a good portion of that as it's growing, and it brings in approximately $100,000 a year, is that a lot of the debt service, if we did, you know, go out, have a bond purchase, for the purchase, outright purchase of this, that's an option that we have as a city, to recommend that to SOPEC, that we would like to use a portion of this for debt service. The other thing to think about is that with us having this system and purchasing it outright at that 6-year mark, or after the 6th year, that, the savings alone for our grid energy costs, because we purchase from AEP, it's like everyone else in the city, that can now be deviated to other projects, because we budget every year for electric consumption. We have to pay the electric bill. And we're talking the #1 energy consumer in the city, or a city mercantile account anyway, and that is the wastewater treatment plant. Number 2 is the water treatment plant that has 178 kilowatt solar array with a microgrid. And then the community center is probably the 3rd highest energy consumer. So 2 of those 3, we would be offsetting our budgeting costs each year, which again could either be used for debt service, and now we're hoping to escalate our bond payments, debt service, or it can go to other city projects. So, I really believe that this is going to be extremely beneficial to the city of Athens, as well as to get us easily, in my opinion, to our 50% reduction of our carbon emissions by 2030. I could go on and on and on, but we had a great study that came out of Power Clean Future Ohio, already addressing per capita what our carbon emissions is, and we're one of the lowest we are the lowest in the state for a city our size. We're one of the lowest in the nation, which is amazing. So again, being good stewards of the planet Earth, I think that something like this is well worth pursuing.
I agree 100%. Yeah, Member Spielness, you haven't said anything yet.
Yeah, I have to say that this is very exciting, and I really compliment all of you that have been involved with this. And based on the answers to the questions that you all have given, I'm even more enthusiastic, so thank you very much.
Member Powell, did you have something else?
Yes, thank you, Member Grace. We've talked, Mr. Greenfield, about pollinators perhaps being grown underneath these. Is that still part of the plan?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That's good news too. Thanks for that. All right, anything else?
So I have one other item.
Yes,
So,
go ahead.
Both Deputy Director Chicky and I have looked pretty carefully at the numbers, and so if any member of council wants to look at the numbers of the various options that Mr. Greenfield talked through, we can help talk you through those. And I do believe that the hybrid approach of the buyout in 6 years, assuming we can get bond financing at 3.5% or better 6 years from now, is probably the best way to go for the city. But rest assured that we're not going to recommend something to you that is going to be a bad financial deal for the city either. And we feel pretty confident that this is the best way to go.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, moving on to the next item on our agenda. This is an update about the Sunday Creek Horizons extension. And I am going to defer to our Service Safety Director for most of that, or the mayor. But I believe that all of council had access to a document providing us with a very detailed update about what Sunday Creek Horizons has been doing. And so did you have specific items you wanted to talk about, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, well, I can kind of tee it up and then I can turn it over to Service Safety Director. I'm glad that you've got that document. I requested that come from Sunday Creek Horizons to speak to both what they have accomplished under this contract with the city, as well as what they plan to do through the end of this year. What we're asking is for council to extend that contract for $22,500 through the end of December, to continue their work on the armory, where they have been extremely helpful and valuable to the city is, a lot of their work on understanding I should preface this with the lack of guidelines at this point in time, but apparently very, very soon we're going to see the guidelines for what is now called the Appalachian Communities Grants, which is the $500 million coming out of the state share for ARPA. And having Sunday Creek Horizons, once those drop, and we believe they're going to drop within the next week or so, those guidelines, that they would be well suited to look to see what is the best way to posture ourselves to go after funding through the Appalachian Communities Grant for the Armory itself. So they've been extremely helpful, and all the Armory to the point where we are right now. We would have been hard pressed to get there without Sunday Creek Horizons help.
Thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is I need the access, I need this expertise, and I need this project management's capability for the rest of the year. We were successful in getting $600,000 in state capital bills, and I would attribute that to their work. We all but have the Ohio Southeast Vibrant Communities Grant. They're not gonna say that until we get all of our financing lined up, but that's $175,000. And the last piece is the Appalachian Communities Grant, which at the end of the day, it looks like it's going to have to be a regional request, and the connections that Sunday Creek Horizons has with other communities across Appalachia will allow us to coordinate that effort to make this request. And so, my goal and what I've promised to the mayor is I'm going to do everything in my power to deliver an armory renovation project to put it back into public use. And Sunday Creek Horizons is allowing us to do that. I just need to keep them on staff. So,
Thank you for those details, and I believe what we as members of council had asked for was an updated scope of work, and that's included in the document from Sunday Creek. So does anyone have questions at this point, members of the committee? Yeah, Member Crowell?
Well, thank you, Member Grace. I think that under Mr. Space's leadership, Mr. Rises and others have done great work at Sunday Creek Horizons. I know there's been some discussion about other projects that they might be able to contribute to. Are we sticking with this proposal of Armory?
We are. What I'd like to do, looking into next year, actually start to budget for it next year, or for this year, to keep them on as a consultant on things like our EV electrification here in the city of Athens is one big project that we really need some help with, and some other things. There is an opportunity, just to share real quick, with the Appalachian Communities grants. There's 3 different buckets that we're looking at right now, as we're being told by Director Mahalik from ODOD, Ohio Department of Development, is that there's going to be $50 million in implementation dollars that comes out at the same time as $250,000 per county. Again, it still has to be asked for and applied for planning. So there's planning dollars, and there's this year's implementation dollars, and then next year there will be the $450 million in implementation dollars, but you have to apply for the planning to do that. And so again, to have Sunday Creek Horizons working with us on that as well would be wonderful. Because one of the big things that we're talking about through the Mayor's Partnership for Progress is potentially applying for a large planning grant to fit with the 18 Appalachian counties that make up Mayor's Partnership for Progress. Technically, we could apply for up to $4.5 million in planning, but not wanting to try and scarf up all the money, we're going to hopefully apply for about half of that for MPP wide. And one of the big topics that's going on within the Mayor's Partnership for Progress is active transportation, and looking at connecting a lot of trails that currently are not connected with each other.
Thank you.
Other questions from other members of the committee? Yes.
Yes, Director Stone, could you elaborate on the scope of collaboration involved in the grant application that would be at the regional level?
So all indications, Member Carey, are that projects that have a regional benefit will score more highly in the rubric that will be published, any day now, related to the early implementation dollars. One of the categories that the feedback we've gotten is going to be score the highest is if there is a project or series of projects that involve more than one community, and not just, county and the city kind of all together, but actually multiple counties and across the region. And so, for instance, in the Armory endeavor, we're looking at a project that will facilitate a co-working environment that could take place here and allow for folks to live in this area and then subsequently have a place to work from time to time. And that's the business or the nonprofit ultimately that will run and be the end use of the Armory. There are a couple other communities in Southeast Ohio that have a similar project on deck, and they're shovel ready. Coshocton is the one that is most aligned, but also Somerset is another one, Gloucester is another one, that have projects that are similar, that if we could create a nexus between those, that would allow for us to basically justify a request that said, hey, this is a regionally beneficial project, because these three or four projects have some sort of arrangement where users could use them in all those communities. And so we think that it's a legitimate ask. We really do, and it will be a strong request.
Thank you. Is there a particular radius of communities that we're thinking our remote place would serve?
It's Appalachian, Ohio.
Yeah.
And so, at this point, we've been looking at places that are shovel ready, because this first early implementation grant will be very quick, at least the way that we understand it. And, this body has already committed to the design necessary to do the Army project, and there's a couple other communities that have done that as well. And so what we don't want to do is go and partner with somebody that has a pie in the sky idea but really isn't shovel ready. And the ones that we've talked to with Coshocton and Somerset specifically are very close to shovel ready.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Other members of council? No? Okay. Any questions from the audience? All right. Thank you for that update. Thank you for being here, Mr. Chicky. And moving on, the next items on the agenda are to talk specifically about updates to our city code. And our law director is here to sort of talk us through this process, why this is something that we do and what is involved, and to answer questions that members of council might have. Do you want to sort of take it from there?
Sure, thank you. So about a year ago, I came before council because one of my projects that I had hoped to implement was to update our city code. And it had not been updated as far as traffic and criminal since about 1994. In fact, the OVI law was very outdated. So our city code is published by Muni Code, which is owned by Civic Plus. I had contacted some, Muni Code wasn't able to do it, to actually update our code. They weren't in Ohio, although they weren't updating Ohio codes. I looked at a different company and during the pandemic learned that Muni Code was doing updates. So we contracted services of Muni Code to actually go through our criminal and traffic, and last year I presented to you updates, and it was quite extensive, if you recall. It was pretty expensive also. So we did that, and the reason it needs to be done before the end of the year is so that it can actually be codified into the code. What happens at the end of the year is the clerk sends the changes to Muni Code, and Muni Code will issue a supplement to our code and then incorporate it into and codify it into the online version. So we did that. We updated criminal and traffic. And it all came to a head when we had the city police cited under the Athens City Code for a theft offense, and the code still said that a misdemeanor was $300, and we knew that under the Ohio Revised Code it was actually $1,000, and there was a little bit of concern about how that would affect our criminal case. So that's when it really came to a head, and I knew that we had to really move forward and update it. So we did that update, and then I know that we all, actually, Member McCary worked very hard on this, as did the mayor, to update the code as far as the gender language. So that's something that was done this year. Each year, the Ohio legislature updates their Ohio Revised Code. They change the revised code, they add things, they delete things. And Muni Code has provided us with the changes from Titles 7, which is traffic, and the general offenses, which are 13. I carefully reviewed those changes. I also had Jesse Branner, who's the assistant, go through those changes, and then we presented those to the clerk, and she presented those to you. I debated, because under 70531 is the private tollway zones, and I debated whether or not to present that to you, knowing that we had an ordinance that was not passed, and there was quite a bit of talk with council on updating the towing provisions, but I included it because I wanted you to see the updated language from the Ohio Revised Code. So tonight, I'm actually going to recommend that you strike that 70531 to give committees or the person who's going to bring this forward an opportunity to actually look at the whole towing section under the private tollway zones. That would be my recommendation for right now. I think there were some concerns about that. So what you see before you are Titles 7, and that's the traffic, and then the general offenses. There aren't as many for Title 13 general offenses, but the new provisions that were passed during this year by the Ohio legislature are underlined, and the things that have been removed have a strike through them. So that just gives you a little background of how we got to this point. So each year, it's going to be about $2,000 to update the code. I had that in my budget. I knew that this was coming, and it's something I feel that is important to keep our city code updated. The city police can cite under the city code, and then some of that money comes back to the city. It's a complicated process, but the city police do often cite under the city code, and the one incident where they cited under the city code and it still said $300 was a problem for our criminal case. So I just think that it's important to keep this updated. And again, those two sections had not been updated since probably 1994. So I'm thankful that Muni Code is able to do it for us now, and that's what you have before you. And I'm glad to take any questions.
Are there questions, first of all, from members of the committee? Yeah, Member Crowell.
Thank you for taking this on. If I understand correctly, everything that is underlined is basically from the Ohio Revised Code.
And it's new to be added in.
Okay, I'm just going to go to my first question, I guess.
Okay.
Which is under definitions, 7.0102. I don't, I don't know when how recent the Ohio Revised Code is. Do we want to include our micromobility, our e-scooters, even listed here under the exceptions, because it does say except motorized bicycles and electric bicycles. Knowing that we have these in our community, do we want to list them there to draw attention to that exception? And then it's really, I wasn't terribly concerned about that. It just was on my mind. And I thought maybe Mr. Cheeky would stay, but it's possible that Director Stone can answer this. Oh, I'm sorry, that's just going to take us in the wrong direction. Let me just continue with this. Definition under BBB, vehicle. and I'm just, legal language confuses me beyond belief. I believe that this says that a bicycle is a vehicle.
Yes,
Is that
but
correct?
not a motor vehicle.
Right. Except devices other than bicycles moved by human power. And it's like a double negative, sort of. It's except other than bicycles. So I think that means that bicycle is a vehicle. So as I go further down in this, and I'm looking specifically at 7.0406, proper lane for travel. First section F. Upon all roadways, any vehicle, so now I'm thinking bicycle, or trackless trolley proceeding at less than the normal speed of traffic at the time and place and under the conditions then existing shall be driven in the right-hand lane then available for traffic. Get that? And then the addition is, and far enough to the right to allow passing by faster vehicles if such passing is safe and reasonable except under any of the following circumstances. I was under the impression that the Ohio Revised Code defines a bicycle as a vehicle and allows it to take up a lane of traffic. That there is no requirement that this seems to say that bicycle has to move over to the right-hand side of the road to allow passing by a faster vehicle. So that's one of my questions.
Okay.
Then actually going backwards a little bit, 7.0404, slow-moving vehicles. I was just curious, it seems to me that C is maybe a little vague. In a case involving a violation of this section, the trier of fact, in determining whether the vehicle was being operated at an unreasonably slow speed, shall consider the capabilities of the vehicle and its operator. Again, thinking of a bicycle, I'm wondering how the trier of fact would determine whether someone was riding their bicycle at an unreasonably slow speed.
That one, I think that when we're talking about the trier of fact, that would be a court.
Right.
The judge. And just here it states that the judge is to consider the capabilities of the vehicle and the operator. This is just an addition. Obviously, things get added to the code, and then sometimes case law interprets exactly what it means.
Okay. And I think actually under this discussion, I can bring up my question maybe for Director Stone, which is back to our e-scooters. One happened to have conked out right across the street from my house this weekend. And so it was actually laying across the sidewalk, so I picked it up and leaned it against the bushes so that it wasn't obstructing somebody walking down the sidewalk. And I haven't ridden one of the new scooters. I haven't paid a lot close attention to them. But I saw there's a big sticker right on the bottom that says, "No riding on sidewalks." Is that in our agreement with the provider? That these devices are not to be ridden on sidewalks?
Yes.
Okay. So sometimes they are, of course, that we know that. But I was also surprised that they seem to be working quite well on Court Street. And I thought that we had geo-fenced Court Street and the arteries for the devices not to work in that area. At least with the previous provider, that was the agreement, and I didn't know with the new provider if that same agreement was under effect.
Member Crow, I was not prepared to speak under this particular committee, Title VII update tonight on whether or not the geofencing was correct on Court Street. However, I can inquire with that. I have not personally seen any on Court Street proper, but that doesn't mean that it's not true. So I will have to check on that.
Fine, thank you. I didn't mean to put you under, anyway, that just came up as I read through this today, thinking about both bicycles and e-scooters and what we have here in the city of Athens and how these new revised code apply to our community. Thank you, Law Director.
Are there other questions specific to this? Yes, Member Spielness.
Hi, thank you. I too wondered about I agree with you about the little scooter things, because I've seen more and more of them lately, and they seem pretty cool, actually. But I can see how they could be a little bit of a problem. I think I'd like to kind of transfer that into the fact that I'm on the Pedestrian Accessibility Committee. And so we are looking at pedestrian in a broader way than is normally considered. And we're looking at, bicycles and anything that rolls or strolls. So there's kind of that, the electric thing is a little beyond that, but still, how do we get those under consideration as part of our thinking about being more pedestrian friendly in general and trying to keep our vehicles that are motorized off people using it less. And I do wanted to bring attention to, and this seems, again, pretty minor, but on the traffic lights and all that, I can't remember what page that's on, and I talked a little bit about this with Law Director Eliason, but it brings up in excruciating detail how people are supposed to respond to every possible light situation. And one of the things it doesn't bring up, at least I didn't see it, one of the things it doesn't seem to bring up is if there's provisions for people who are hearing impaired, then having some kind of sound to help people get across the street, pedestrian get across the street. So I know that this isn't for that purpose exactly, but if we're going to make those changes possibly in another procedure or whatever, then it ought to be reflected here too, since the rest of it is so incredibly detailed. Again, minor point, but I do want to make sure that we're considering ADA compliance in everything that we're trying to do here.
Thank you, Member Spielness.
Oh, I do have one other thing.
Go ahead.
So I appreciate the comments about holding back on towing. Oh, before I say that, one of the things that's a little bit confusing with this is that this doesn't show the entirety of the ordinances. So there's like, the change was C or something, but B and A aren't there. So that's a little bit confusing in trying to go through this. And I'm wondering if we ought to look at all of it?
Well,
Would that be
we
helpful?
did have it all in.
Yeah?
And we meaning Debbie Walker and I discussed how best to present this and the most cost-effective way to do it as far as being codified. But we can certainly add those back in so that you can see them. I think that we may still have that document. Is that right? We have it.
Oh, I'm sure we do.
We do.
Well, and I was just going to say, when Member Crowell was speaking about 70404 Section C, which is an addition, it's in a case involving a violation of this section, the trier of fact in determining whether the vehicle was being operated at an unreasonably slow speed shall consider the capabilities of the vehicle and its operator. So I pulled up our Muni code to see, okay, well, what is a violation of this section? And it's that no person shall operate a vehicle, trackless trolley, or streetcar at such a slow speed as to impede or block the normal and reasonable movement of traffic. So if someone is cited for traveling so slowly that they're blocking or impeding traffic, The additional language is telling the court, take into account the
Right.
capabilities of the vehicle that has been cited. And so we can see the whole thing if we pull up our current Muni code and then overlay, or look at two documents side by side as far as, okay, well, what is the addition? And so to me, reading what's currently in our code and then referencing the language to be added, to me, it's like, oh, well, that makes sense, and it's clearly an improvement. As far as taking into account the capabilities of the cyclist, I would hope that they would not be cited for moving so slowly that they're impeding traffic. But if they were, the court is to take into account the type of vehicle and the capabilities that it is. So to me, that's an improvement on our current, but it does take a bit of looking at two different documents to see the whole picture. So are there other questions or comments from members of the committee? Yes, Member Spiel.
Okay. I actually don't have a problem with I personally don't have a problem with leaving the towing parts in there. What's a little bit confusing, and I guess I need some clarification about this, Law Director Eliason and maybe administration, that in reading over, the ORC on towing it ad nauseum, there are some things that aren't included in here that are part of the ORC, and wondering if that needs to be incorporated in here too. Maybe you just need to school me a little bit on this, because some of the things that we have been discussing in terms of revising our towing ordinance is kind of included in here already, but some isn't. So if we pass this with the entirety of it, we would still have the opportunity to revise the towing ordinance separately, is my understanding, right? Is that correct?
Yes, this is private towway zones.
Right.
These are the zones that are created. I mean, you could see how specific this is.
It is.
Of everything. Every I has to be dotted, T crossed.
Right.
And the signs have to comply with the Ohio Revised Code. So we're just talking about the private towway. The problem is when, it's not a problem, but when you get back to section M, we refer back to 70617, which is the amount for the tow, which is the $50, no more than $50.
Right. But there are some specifics in here regarding towing procedures.
Exactly, yes. Those are all in the revised code.
Right, exactly. And something not mentioned here that I think is relevant, and perhaps, I guess I'm a little bit curious about this, violations by towing companies can be
A minor misdemeanor.
minor misdemeanors, or, if repeated, can be more serious misdemeanors. And I think people need to know that.
Thank you, Member Spielman.
Thank you.
Are there questions from other members of council regarding these updates? Yes, Member Swank.
I guess this, just following up on this would be a question for the law director. If we were to strike 7.05.31 from this, from our discussion, what rules and regulations would be in effect? Current code?
The current code.
And to that point that was just made about the $50 thing, for private tow zones, the fee's $129.
Under the Ohio law.
Right.
Right. And this has the reference back to our city code.
Which pertains to, this is a double negative, private tow away zones,
Yes,
which we can regulate,
we can.
yes. I guess I'm inclined to And this is good. I mean, I spent a lot of, and I must say, and I want to commend the mayor right off the bat, really appreciate the administration getting all these materials to Debbie and Debbie to us. I mean, it really, there's a lot of work this weekend, but boy, I feel a whole lot more prepared coming to this meeting than, just seeing it for the first time. So thank you, everybody who was responsible for doing that. But you just pick any of these things out of here. For example, no towing service shall remove a vehicle from a private towaway zone except pursuant to a written contract. It establishes some really clear guidelines. It really does in great detail. And certainly want legislation that we pass to be good legislation, but also, as we did last week, to do it in a timely manner.
So it sounds to me like what council wants to see is the entire ordinance section so that you can see the references if there's A and B and you just had C and D, which we can do that. And then there are some other questions. But I remember, Crowell, I may ask you, I may email you to be more specific so I can try to answer that. So,
Are there any other questions from members of council for the law director on these two ordinances?
and this can, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is a quick question. I've been looking for a concept that I know is jaywalking, but it looks like Ohio Revised Code might refer to as pedestrians walking in roadway. But I am wondering if you can direct me to where that would be in here.
In this section,
Yeah.
it may be that it wasn't updated.
The only things in these ordinances are things that changed under Ohio Revised Code during the past year. And so therefore, Muni Code then contacts the city of Athens and says, hey, these are things you need to update if you want to stay aligned with ORC. And so if there were no changes to those particular codes in the past year, then we wouldn't see anything in the ordinances here. And what we have on the books
Thank you.
currently in the city matches what's on ORC.
But I will take a closer look at that for you.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Swank.
This is a procedural question, and probably for the president of council. Looking at the calendar, if we continue to follow the schedule we've followed for this calendar year, counting next week, the 17th of October, we have 5 regularly scheduled business meetings. The 17th of October, the 7th and 21st of November, and the 5th and 19th of December. Because this doesn't involve any money, if we don't wrap this up by the end of the year, can it carry over to next year? Or would we have to start back over?
This can carry over. The problem is it won't get codified.
Okay.
So ideally, so that when folks go to look up local code online, it would be best to have it done before the end of the year so it can be in the updated version that is most accessible to the public.
But if it doesn't get codified, it's fine also. We'll still, I think I'm correct in saying that it would still be online. Yes. But it just won't be in the updates that we get.
Of course, anything we pass in January, February, March wouldn't be either.
No, that's true too.
Yeah, so, but it can carry over. That's the ultimate question.
Also, we are working on, in my office, we're working on Title 11, and I don't think that's going to get to you before in time. And there's some major changes in Title 11 that we're going to present.
Question then, Law Director Eliason, you mentioned possibly not including towing because then the other things could move forward.
Well, there are some pretty serious questions as far as the motor vehicle, the devices that we have in town. Right, it sounds like more clarity is needed.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions before we move on? Yes, Member Croft?
Just that we could suspend the rules if we wanted to pass this
Good.
more quickly, if it does take some time to get it right.
Right.
Thank you.
It wouldn't qualify for an emergency clause, though, but the rules could be suspended.
And it certainly will have had adequate discussion. Okay, thank you all. That concludes this committee for this evening.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Grace. We'll move on now with Finance and Personnel Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Crowell and joined by Councilmembers Reisner, Ziff, and Spieldis.
Thank you, President Isley. We have one item on our agenda tonight, and that is the community center roof replacement. This would be amending an ordinance passed in May of this year, 050, ordinance 5022. We received an update from the architect that has done the estimate for the design and estimate for the new roof on the community center that we know from the presentation tonight by Mr. Greenfield that part of the solar project will be waiting for the community center roof to be completed. The community center roof, which is project number 353, the estimate is now $485,036.25, and this does not include contingency. The original authorization in May was for $432,900. So this is a difference of $52,100. The city administration is recommending that we appropriate another $67,100 to make this an even $500,000 for the community center roof. I will note that this is not only a brand new roof, but does include a solar deck board, as well as the rack anchors for the solar panels, the modules that we heard tonight from Mr. Greenfield. I think probably the best place to take these additional funds from is our capital fund, Fund 580. If people are interested in the nitty-gritty details, the gross square footage of the community center roof is 43,000 square feet, and this works out to about $11 per square foot. We have already allocated money from Fund 272 as well as 273, and the city administration would really like to avoid using any more money from that levy fund, and that is why I am recommending tonight to take the additional money from 580, our capital fund. We want, the city administration would like to get this out to bid so that we don't lose any further time. But they can't really award this bid until this amendment passes, as it comes in higher than the current authorization. Are there any questions from the committee about this item? Other members of council? Yes, Mr. Swank.
This is a 12% increase from the original estimate. Can you provide some detail as to why the increase?
I cannot, but perhaps Director Stone can help us out.
Thank you, Member Crowd. Member Swank, the feedback from the architects is the construction market is crazy right now. So for instance, and this is new information as of this afternoon, but we got one bid for the pickleball and tennis courts this afternoon that was 85% over the architect's estimate. And so that's
8.5?
85% over the architect's estimate. So 185% of the architect's estimate, and it's a function of just demand in the construction industry at the moment. So we're seeing probably similar circumstances with roofers, and so that's the feedback basically that we're getting, is that we're not going to be successful if we, because the rule is under state law is that a design professional must provide an estimate for a public improvement. That's either an architect or an engineer, depending upon the nature of the construction, that is published with the bid. And a public entity may not award for greater than within 10% of whatever that published estimate is. And so the feedback we're getting is if we publish an estimate based upon the previous number, which was 432,000 and some change, nobody's going to come in within 10% of that. So they're recommending that we go forward with 485,000 basically as the estimate, just based on what they're seeing in the market right now. Now that might go down, as we get into next year and supply chain gets a little better and labor gets a little bit more free on certain trades. But for the time being, if we're to bid it today, the recommendation is to increase the architect's estimate to 485,000. And so I asked to have the additional money come out of capital, because I'm trying to avoid tapping 273 anymore than we have to. We're zeroing out 272, which is the levy that was passed to build the community center back in 20 years ago. We're using the rest of the money in that fund, and then that fund will go away basically. But we've got lots of capital things in the rec world, and so our thinking is the roof. That's a logical capital cost, just like the roof on this building or the roof on other buildings in the city that 580 wouldn't necessarily be used for. So we thought that'd be an appropriate place to take this additional money from.
Other members of council? Members of the public? That ends finance and personnel. Thank you, President Leslie.
Thank you, Councilmember Crowell. And that ends our evening of committee meetings. It's 8:15 p.m. and we will